the time 5:30. It is now time for the program Transforming Your Relationships with Bonita Grange. Stay tuned and be blessed. Bonita Grange, go ahead, sir, and unmute and speak, sir.
Welcome again, one more time to Transforming Your Relationship. Thanks for joining in. And if you like the video below, you can click on the subscribe button. Thank you. Thanking again, Pastor Clive and First Lady, amen, and the First Lady from Higher Ground Tabernacle Ministry, and our radio host, Roshane Douglas, for spearheading the station. Tonight, I am your host again, Bonita Grange, a relationship and life coach. Joining me will be a good friend of mine, Jody Cush. Welcome, Jody Cush. She is a woman of God that have a heart for the youth and souls in general. We have worked together in the church, and she's such a delight to work with such a beautiful spirit. She'll tell you herself about a program they have every second Thursday. So, Jody, we're glad you are here. Tell us a little bit about yourself. Some folks could know who you are, and you're no stranger. Go ahead.
First of all, I want to say thank you so much for having me on the show this evening. It's a pleasure to be here. And hello, audience. I'm very excited to be here. About a little bit about me. I am a pharmacist by profession, but over the years I've been very attracted to marriage therapy. And as such, I started a course in pastoral and Christian counseling, a master's degree. I currently work with Marriage Matters, which is a flagship program from Mom Intel, which is Missionaries Outreach Ministries. And that's what Elder Bunny here was talking about. So we meet every second Thursday and we talk about everything concerning marriage. Nothing is off the table. But thank you for inviting me. I'm looking forward to your program tonight, sir.
Amen. Well, thank you very much. Yeah, her mother's a wonderful lady, so she'll be coming on with a spicy topic here in the very near future. As you folks all know what the spicy topics are, you can use your imagination for that. But let's start off with a scripture tonight found in James chapter 3. Our topic tonight is the relationship killer, part 2 from last week. James 3, starting from verse 4, it says, "Behold also the ships which, though they be so great and are driven of fierce winds, yet are they turned about with very small helm, whithersoever the governor listeth. Even so the tongue is a little matter." Somebody says the tongue, it's the little red devil behind the white pearly gates. The tongue, it boasteth great things. Behold, how great a matter a little fire kindleth. And the tongue is a fire, a world of iniquity. So is the tongue among our members, that it defileth the whole body, and setteth on fire the course of nature, and it is set on the fire of hell. For every kind of beast, and of birds, and of serpents, and of things in the sea is tamed, and hath been tamed of mankind. But the tongue can no man tame. It is an unruly evil, my Lord, full of deadly poison. Therewith, James said, we bless God, even the Father, and therefore curse we men which are made after the similitude of God. So tonight, as we mentioned before, we're talking about the relationship killer. And we can go quite a few ways with this, but we'll just start off the two most important. So, John, what do you think the two most important superpower skills in a relationship?
Superpower skills. I think great communication skills is one for sure, and I think the right attitude, the attitude of unity. We're in this together. It's not you, it's not me, it's us, and we're gonna make it work.
No, great. And my mind was also thinking about communication skills, superpower skills in a relationship. I'm thinking also about asking good questions and listening, asking good questions rather than just surface. I was in a seminar retreat some time back, and the women, the wives, were having issues with the men talking, but they were always asking the question that they asked the men were always a close-ended question. For an example, so how was your day today? Good. Now, if you ask a question, how was your day? What was good about your day, or what challenge you have about your day?
Mhm.
It opens up a conversation. But
For
just to
sure.
ask a close-ended question, many times the conversation pretty well stands still. So there's a Chinese character um, that's used to represent. Just give me a minute. Give me a minute here. It used to represent the different parts, basically of the body. The Chinese verb to listen is perhaps he said the simplest, most comprehensive example of open-minded, active, complete listening known. The Chinese character that means to listen is made up of the character that means to the eyes, the ears, undivided attention, and the heart. The Chinese view listening as a whole body experience that involve all of these things. So, Jody, you're involved with Marriage Matter, and you've gone over some of
Mhm.
the issues with communication. So, what's
Mhm.
what's a general consensus out there when you folks have conversations around that?
We see quite a few issues coming up. I think one of the biggest issues is, as you mentioned before, the whole thing of listening, the whole thing of listening and listening empathetically, listening. I think as we know, there are different spectrums along the listening. If we call it a pole, there are different spectrums along, and
Mm,
so you can listen just to hear, just you can pretend to be listening and just but you actually don't hear anything. You can listen to rebut, like I'm listening just so I can get you and I know exactly what I'm going to argue about or where I'm going to get, where I'm going to really get one punch in, or you can listen to really understand and to learn and to empathize. So I think that is missing from a lot of relationships.
mm,
I think first of all we don't really listen very well. Like you mentioned the Chinese proverb, a lot of times we're listening while we're multitasking, so we're not listening with the eyes. And when you don't listen with the eyes, we miss the slumped shoulders, we miss the facial expressions and the micro expressions, we miss the flushed skin or the goose pimples. We missed a lot of signals that could give
mm,
us cues as to exactly what's happening with our loved ones or with our spouse in the case of marriage. So I think just that whole idea of active listening and listening while suspending judgment is huge again,
mm,
because I think if we listen and we're listening, and at the same time, there's a lot of psychological noise in our head, psychological noise in terms of judgment.
right.
Something is like something saying to you, whatever they're saying, they don't mean it. Then I think it robs us of the opportunity to really connect with our spouse.
No, absolutely. With the relation coaching that I do, man, I'm not picking on you, but the ladies and the wives many times come around and
Mhm.
will tell the man that you are not listening. Like, where were you when I was just speaking to you? Were
Mhm.
you overseas? Were you down the road? Were you shopping? Were you playing your video games? Where were you? So, I think when it comes to also communication is understanding, and I touch a little bit on that here in one of our past sessions, is understanding ourselves fully. So if I'm going to have a conversation, we talk about it. The topic was about the relationship killer. So
Mhm.
if we approach a conversation with anger or frustration,
Mhm.
it's going to be something that's going to fuel the conversation even before it starts. Like you mentioned, even the very body language and the very tone. And I think to understand yourself first, I think many times we got to be present with the moment and to know exactly really what's going on at the moment. What is it that will fuel me?
Mhm.
What is it that's propelling me to go in an area that I don't want to go? And well, I had mentioned we had talked about Brene Brown that had a
Mhm.
quote where she talks about vulnerability is the birthplace where your life can be changed, where connection can be made. So, what did you find out about or had conversations around vulnerability in your session with the different individuals that spoke? what was it challenging to them about that, whether it be from the men's side or whether it be from the women's side?
I find that generally speaking, more women were willing to be vulnerable in terms of communicating. And I think that, in all fairness to men, we have had more practice where that is concerned.
Okay.
Because just from childhood, little girls were always allowed to cry and to express themselves and to say
Mm,
what they don't like and what's going wrong. But the society that I grew up in, when little boys did it, they were being told that they need to be tough, they need to toughen up, and they need to be men. So I
okay.
think over the years, men have been taught to be tough and taught not to cry. You're soft when you cry, you know? And so
Mm,
anger has been like the only means, like the only acceptable way over the years in many
mm,
societies for men to actually express themselves.
right.
So any emotion outside of anger, which looks strong and you thumb through the wall and you know, so any expression outside of that sometimes has not necessarily been welcomed. I don't think men have felt at liberty to be able to really express themselves. And then
Mm,
now they get married and you want them to be vulnerable in 5 minutes when you told them to shut up their whole life and take it like a man. So I think,
okay.
yeah, I think we have to probably re-examine how we're socializing our boys and our young men, so they feel the freedom to be vulnerable and still be respected and regarded as a strong man.
And you, yeah, you have a young man, a young boy, a beautiful young man, and a beautiful young lady. You know, what would you want to tell your young boy about vulnerability, about even as young as he is growing up?
As young as he is, I am so proud of him. He is
Yeah.
able to express himself
Wow.
very well. I
Okay.
don't know. I remember one
Maybe
day.
maybe too much.
Yeah, but his father is very strict, so he tends to be a little bit afraid of his dad. So he doesn't want his sister to tell on him if he does anything wrong. Doesn't want her to tell dad. So one day he did something and she said, "I'm gonna tell dad on you." And he started crying and he turned to her and he said, "Eri, when you tell dad on me, I feel like I'm alone out in a forest and I am so scared." You
Wow.
know? For him to express himself. And at the time he was 4, but for him to express himself like that. So he's very
Mm,
good at expressing himself, and he will say he communicates well. He will say, "I don't want to play right now. It's not that I don't love you. I love you, but I just don't want to do it right now. Can we do it later?" So,
okay.
so, so he's emotionally intelligent and he expresses himself well. And I encourage that. I don't want him
Beautiful.
to cry every 5 minutes over everything. I don't want him to be like that, but I want him to know
Mm.
that it is okay to cry sometimes.
No, absolutely, absolutely. Because there's a program, Expression of the Heart, I think, one of, forget the name right now, but it was mentioned that one of the elders on there mentioned also to being in the army, you're taught to be tough and everything else. So
Mhm.
having that mindset and mentality, it serves well in one area, but it doesn't serve well in another area. The mentality and the mindset that you might have when you're in the army, it's a different mindset you have when you come into the home. I know of one individual that the same way that the officers in the army was training him is the same way that he was training his child. But it
Mm.
wasn't working in the home because the way that
Uh,
they talk to you out there, it's a different way that now that he needs to change his vocabulary, needs to change just the way he is approached.
mm.
So when it comes to our communication, the relationship killer here, what is it? Some things that I think a person can control. I talk about the control circle, and then you have the outer circle, which is the out of control circle. What are some things that you think a person can control? I mean, we might not even think about it before we speak, especially if we're being irritated, especially if we're angry at something or whatever. We really want to express ourselves, and at that time, you know what? We don't care what we say. We don't care how we say it. But that's a time where we got to control our spirit and be allow our spirit to be subjected onto us. So, what's from your thoughts here? What is it that I can control when it comes
Mhm.
to communication.
Is it okay if I make a quick comment on the point you just made before I answer that question?
Absolutely. Go ahead.
But based on the point you just made about persons just kind of like men being trained in the army and carrying home that kind of army
Mm-hmm.
um behavior home to their family, I think it's important for us to be able to compartmentalize,
Right.
in
Absolutely.
relationships,
Mm-hmm.
and that is huge. We have to be able to turn off work. You might
Right.
be as a woman, you might be the boss at work, but you're not necessarily the boss at home.
Mm-hmm.
So I think compartmentalizing is very crucial. As you mentioned, what it is that you can control.
Right.
First of all, let me be real.
Yes,
when
definitely.
you're
We want
really
it to be real. This is a real.
when you're really upset, sometimes you're not necessarily your best self. And
Absolutely.
so I think one important thing too is to be able to apologize when you're not your best self. Own up to it and apologize. And I do that with my kids a lot. I'm like, Mommy got really upset. What I said
Mm-hmm.
was not right. And I shouldn't have said it, or I shouldn't have raised my voice. And that's not the best way to communicate, and I'm sorry. You know? So
Mm-hmm.
even if I don't always get it right, at least I am not just passing on. They know it's okay to be upset, but it's not okay to behave a certain way.
Right.
And
Right.
if I do, I correct the behavior so they know that it's wrong, right? In terms of being able to control, though, I think the words of our mouth is very important to control what comes out, because there's a saying, stick and stones may break your bones, but
Was it-
words never hurt you. I think that's the most
Right.
untrue statement
Absolutely.
ever coined.
Absolutely.
um Words can hurt you, and we talk about God. He spoke, this whole world came into existence because of
Mm-hmm.
words. And I think in a similar way, we can use our words to build, or we can use our words to hurt and to tear down. If you listen to a lot of motivational speakers, sometimes it's just one thing that somebody said to them that really made them believe that they could do it. So what you can control the words that come out of your mouth.
Right. Right.
Difficult as it is sometimes it's best not to speak when you're really upset. You can also control your tone. Sometimes another tricky one can be hard. And you can control just being your authentic self.
Mm. Mm-hmm.
I think what you can't always control that other person's perception of you.
That was the next question.
Oh,
What is
sorry. Go ahead. Go ahead. Sorry, don't want to jump the gun. Go
no,
ahead.
no, that's okay. You just flow right into it. What is it? What is it that I can control when I'm communicating and trying to communicate at that time?
Your tone. And to a point, your body language, because you might feel tempted to roll your eyes and you just kind of keep them still. So you can control your body language. I think we communicate. I think we communicate in every single thing that we do and
Mm-hmm.
say.
Right.
Or if we don't say, if we're silent too, that's another means of communicating. That if you're not normally silent and now all of a
Mm-hmm.
sudden you've gone silent,
Right.
that's a way of communicating that something's off, something's wrong. And I communicate by the way I look at you, even when you walk through the door. As is I'm saying welcome home, I'm happy to see you. I'm saying you again, oh good lord. So so I think we're always communicating kindness, respect, or anger, contempt, etc. And I think where things can get kind of tricky is to know, is the person just communicating their feelings in this moment,
Mm-hmm.
or are they communicating that they are upset with me, or there's something wrong with me in this
Right.
moment?
Right. It's interesting too because what is it that I can't control? Definitely, I can't control how another person is going to act or respond. But
Mm,
the things that we say sometimes in the heat of the moment, one thing that we must be reminded of is sometimes it's not very easy to come back from what comes out of your mouth.
mm-hmm.
If you
It's
were
true.
planning on having a good time and being intimate that night, you know what? That is just shut down. That door is closed.
So
You
true.
just gotta wait until the emotion comes back. You gotta wait until you're both back in balance again, where you can have that conversation. So to be careful at that time, because it's so hard to come back from words that has been released from your
Mhm.
mouth. You can say you're sorry from now until Jesus come, and I'm not saying they won't accept your apology, but it will always be in the back of their mind until fully trust, I believe, is fully regained again.
Yeah.
And as you were speaking there, one of the things too is approach. You mentioned about tone, is approach.
Mhm.
There's a beautiful scripture in the Bible. It's found in I believe it's 2 Kings chapter 1.
Okay.
It talks about Second Kings chapter
Abigail.
1 verse 9. No, you can come in with that one here after this. So you talk you
Okay. Okay.
you had mentioned that to me
Okay.
before. But it's about these three captains that want to approach Elijah now. At the time, Elijah was in a mountain or in a cave, and he was running away from the king because of what had transpired. And the king sent out some captains to tell Elijah, "Hey, the king wants to see you." These captains went. One captain went out, and he had 50 men with him. But he went out in Elijah, and you can read it, 2 Kings chapter 1, verse 9. It says, "Then the king sent unto him a captive of 50 with his 50, and he went up to him, and behold, he sat on the top of a hill, and he spake unto him, the man of God, the king. The king said, Come on down."
Mhm.
I want to get to my point. And Elijah answered and said to the captain of 50, "If I be a man of God, then let fire come down from heaven and consume thee and thy 50." And there came down fire from heaven and consumed him and his 50.
50.
So 2 Kings again, chapter 1, verse 11. Again, also the king now sent out another captain with 50, with his 50, after hearing basically that they didn't come back. I would imagine that they were destroyed. And the captain answered and said unto him, "O man of God, thus hath the king said, Come down quickly." And Elijah said unto them, "If I be a man of God, then let fire come down from heaven and consume thee and the 50." And the Bible said the fire of God came down from heaven and consumed him and the 50. But what I like is the third captain that came. And he sent again a cap that this king was adamant to get Elijah to come to him because of what he had said. He was adamant to get Elijah, and he's already lost 100 men already. So it
Mhm.
seems like I don't care how much I've lost so far. I want this conversation to take place.
Mhm.
He sent again captain of the third captain with 50 and his
Mhm.
50. And the third captain of 50 went up and came and fell on his knees before Elijah and
Mhm.
besought him and said unto him, "O man of God, I pray thee, let my life and the life of these 50 thy servants be precious in thy sight. Behold, there came down fire from heaven." He's given a testimony of what happened from before because of what he had heard and what he had known. And he said, "And then burnt up the two captains of the former 50s with their 50s. Therefore, let my life now be precious in thy sight." And the
Mhm.
angel of the Lord spoke to Elijah and says, "Go down with him. Be not afraid of him." And he arose and went down with him unto the king. So my question always was, it was a conversation between two individuals. And
Mhm.
what made the third captain request different than the first two captains? And it goes back to humility. When it
Humility.
comes to having a conversation, you got to make space for humility. You show humility by letting go of thinking that you need to impress someone. The Bible said that the individual came and basically knelt before he fell on his knees before he humbled
Mhm.
himself before he had that conversation of what he wanted. And without a shadow of a doubt, the third captain had the right approach, and therefore he got the right response. A lot of
Mhm.
time in relationship, when it comes to communication, if we're abrasive and we just want to get our point across and everything else, don't expect to have a right response from your spouse that you are trying to communicate with. But if you have the right response, 9 out of 10 times, you are
Mhm.
going to have the right response. And I've always kept this in mind. I'm not saying I have perfected it, but I'm always conscious and mindful of it. And so right approach, right response. So coming with Abigail, I believe you had another scenario there, also another example about the approach and how that can change.
Um, right. So just the story of Abigail,
Right. Hmm.
the story of, I'm not sure how many of us are familiar with the story, but David was basically running from Saul at the time, who was trying to kill him.
Right.
And David and his soldiers happened to be hiding out close to where Abigail and her husband lived.
Okay.
And so while David was there, because he was such a good man, he was helping to kind of protect Nabal, which is Abigail's husband's cattle. Abigail
Hmm.
and Nabal's cattle, and looking over their property and making sure that nobody came to attack them. So they're protecting them basically.
Right.
And there came a time when David and his men were hungry, and Nabal was having a feast, and asked for some food, and Nabal insulted him greatly.
Mm.
And one of the servants who was there was very offended, because um, he knew basically the type of protection that David was offering to Nabal,
Right. Hmm.
and how
Beautiful.
kind David was to him. And so he went and complained to Abigail, which is Nabal's wife. And Abigail had such a beautiful attitude. The Bible said in 1 Samuel 25, when Abigail saw David, she quickly got off her donkey and bowed down before David
Wow.
with
There
her
you go again.
face to the ground.
Mm.
He fell at his feet and said, "My Lord, let the blame be on me alone." Imagine, she had nothing to do with this. She was just hearing. And she said, "Let the blame be on me alone. Please let your servant speak to you," in
Wow.
reference to herself. "Hear what your servant has to say. May my Lord pay no attention to that wicked man Nabal." Or some interpretation said, he said foolish man, because the name Nabal means fool. So
Right.
um so and she cooked lovely meals and brought it to David and his men,
Mm.
and she begged pardon on behalf of her husband. And she was very wise, because I think she knew what was coming. David would have killed Nabal. He would have most likely killed her as well. He would have wiped them all out. But because of her attitude, or her humility, because of
Right.
her approach to him,
Hmm.
she satisfied a need that he had also. So she also showed kindness. And
Mm.
because of that, she was spared. And then years later, or sometime after, when Nabal died, David remembered her and went back for her and married her.
Beautiful.
So it ended well because of her wisdom and her humility.
My beautiful. I've always said I think God gave women like an extra sense that men don't have. Sorry, men.
I have to agree with you. No, I'm clearly biased.
Sorry, man. It's an extra intuition because I've always said, any man that have a good wife, if they listen to that wife even half or three quarters of the time, man, you can
Mhm.
put an amen in the chat and says amen or yep, you're right. When a man that has a good wife, and had listened half or three quarters, and I'd be the first to put my hand up, they'd be a lot farther ahead. Sometimes financially, spiritually, holistically, whatever the case might be, right? If they're fully honest with themselves. So again, those two stories that we talked about, I believe anything that we want to know about relationship, it's already in the Word of God. You can read a lot of books out there, and they're wonderful, and they'll break it down, and that's just beautiful. God has given other individuals knowledge, but when it comes to the Word, the answer is already there if you really want to find it. And bringing out these two examples is right approach, just like the third captain and his 50. Right
Mhm.
approach, right response. Just like Abigail and David, right
Mhm.
approach, and again, right response.
Can I ask you a question,
Absolutely.
Sir Bonito? Right. Why do you think it is that a lot of times men don't necessarily listen to their wives?
Wow, that's a loaded question.
It's a loaded question. No, I was just, as I was just thinking about it as you said it, and some thoughts came to mind. I'm thinking, why would you not listen to somebody? Why would you dismiss somebody? I think think we dismiss people for different reasons, and
That's right.
one reason could be pride, because
That's
how dare you think you know this more than I do,
mm-hmm.
you know? And I think another reason could be a lack of it's almost like a lack of respect. It's like, I don't think that you have the wisdom or the knowledge to be able to talk to me on this, you know?
Right.
So it's either a form of disregard where I'm not listening,
Mm-hmm.
or probably pride,
Well,
you know?
you're right. I'll tell you one thing, and I've spoken to a lot of men because as a relationship coach, get to talk to a lot of people even before I got involved in this area of my life. And one thing, a man will not listen as much to his wife as he should. But
Mhm.
guess what happened? And I'll be the first one to put my hand up, okay? We will go to work and we will
Mhm.
have conversation with our coworkers. And
Mhm.
guess what? The same thing my wife was telling me.
Light turns on.
Wow, this is embarrassing. Just being real. The same, and I've had this multiple
Mhm.
occasion, okay, and I'm learning. But the
Mhm.
same thing that my wife told me for some reason, whatever, because we're so familiar with one another. Yeah, but
Mhm.
she's got a history that the conversations that we've had and the decision that we had to make together always work out. So why wouldn't I believe now? Unless you have someone that every time that the conversation started, there was always conflict and nothing went right and everything always went sour. It would cause an individual to pull away rather than to pull toward of their spouse. But
Mhm.
I've gone to work and I put myself on the pedestal, and I've heard an individual as we had conversation exactly what my wife was telling me. This individual was telling me the same thing, and so
Or
and
is
so,
it their approach? Could it
and
be that
so
their
what
approach was just better than her approach? I mean, what is
not,
it?
no, no, it's not better. I think, like I said, it goes with being so familiar with one another. It goes with a
Mhm.
little bit of pride, as if to say, well, maybe does she really think she have the answer? Like I think my answers is just as good, whatever. I think there's a little bit of pride in there. But again, if there has been a history pattern that validate what she's been saying, I mean, why even go get a second opinion? So having a
Mhm.
conversation with this individual at work, I come home and I'll says, "Hey, honey, you know what? ABC, whatever we're talking about, I can't remember. It's been a while now because I've been retired. But I would say, hey, honey, we have this conversation today, and yeah, this sounds like a really good idea." And she just kind of looked at me, kind of rolled her eyes, and says, "Really? Okay." Well, you realize that's exactly the same thing that we talked about before. So I just crawl under my shell and I just disappear out of.
Well, you ought to credit yourself to you married a very wise woman, and so you have to make it work for you, right?
We
Right?
have to make
Stronger together.
we have to make it. It'd be interesting if I had some men on the line there for comments that would put in. Why is it that we second guess our wives when, especially those
Mhm.
that have a good, you're married to a good woman,
Mhm.
she's got the history with you. The same thing. The same thing when it comes to my two children. Like my wife has a history with them as what has been said and what had been mentioned and direction that's been given to the T.
Mhm.
They know that if she says this or whatever, that this is what's going to happen. There was a time she was on the couch upstairs. I'll never forget. Um, she was lying down and she just felt the phone. Let's phone the children them, and she told them exactly what they were doing, where they were at, and they were amazed. And one tried to come home and maybe almost tried to cover up, but the other one says, "No, we're not going to cover up. We're going to tell the truth." So they have a history with her that history is that spirit of discernment, right? So going back to communication, why is it men, and actually I'd love to have some men in the chat, why is it's so hard for us to take that advice, that information from our wife, but we will go outside and we will do backflips and do hula hoops and everything else.
Mhm.
So I don't know what you have heard from. Maybe you can share a little bit from marriage matters. Why that is. What did you come up with for the men on that respect?
I'm not sure if we've ever really delved into why men don't listen to their wives very much.
Okay,
It's an
that's a
interesting
topic in the
topic.
future.
We could probably explore it in the future for sure. But I
Okay.
think one of the topics that we were on a few weeks ago, that was really huge was when we dealt with the man cave, and how
Mm,
some men retreat to their caves and what was being unintentionally communicated to their wives during that
right.
time,
Okay.
right? So just getting in the cave or pulling away was actually making the women feel disregarded,
Mm,
um making them feel very lonely, very frustrated,
okay.
and feeling as though they were in this thing alone. It's like the house is on fire and one person has just left. They didn't even try to put out the fire. They left you in the burning building. That's the kind of feeling that many wives have. And,
Right.
and the husbands, on the other hand, were saying, no, but what we're having is like an overload, and we feel like if we don't deal with the fuse, we're going to have a problem here. So what we
Mm,
do is just shut down in order to prevent the overload, or to prevent things from going really haywire. So just different, just the way we behave sometimes as different sexes, I guess you could say. We're sending different messages, and sometimes the message that is being sent is not necessarily the message that we intend to send. But
absolutely.
yeah, but it can get interpreted differently than how you want it to.
So you mentioned about a man cave.
Mhm.
So if I mentioned to you about, give an example of a snapping turtle syndrome, what comes to mind when you say that? When I say that in conversation, when they have a snapping turtle
Snap
syndrome.
and turtle. As you mentioned, the snap and turtle syndrome. You find that sometimes a turtle would want to protect itself,
Mm-hmm.
and so the turtle sometimes doesn't allow itself to be vulnerable because it wants to be protected.
Right.
If we stay in ourselves and don't allow ourselves to be vulnerable, we're not going to move very far. We're not going to enjoy. If you even think of the turtle on the sand, how much of the beach and the sand can he really enjoy? How much of the sunshine can his skin get when he's
Mm-hmm.
in that shell? So staying in the shell, we deprive ourselves of other benefits that we could have in the relationship. We deprive ourselves of growing. We deprive ourselves of having new experiences, and we just basically we're protected, so to speak, but we're not really living and growing and thriving in the relationship.
No, I like what you said. They withdraw themselves, and
Mhm.
so it's as a turtle, as you'd mentioned, we want to feel safe, so we pull back, we hold back our feelings. We're not expressing like we should be. What a turtle will do, or if we could personify that kind of attitude or spirit, I'm just going to go back into my man cave because what you've said to me has been hurtful. I'm going back into my man cave, and I'm just going to wait until the storm is over. I'm going to wait until you cool off because I feel safe because you have snapped. It's making me feel less than. And a lot of times in a conversation, whether from the male or female, if we're not careful, we've known one another sometime barely. We've known one another for quite a while. We've become so familiar with one another that as the year goes by, if we're not careful, you know what, we're not fully conscious of our conversation of how hurtful that we can be. And so when
Mhm.
it comes to the relationship killer, what are some triggers? What are some triggers and you feel that can basically set one off? I mean, I got some
I
ideas.
think I think almost anything can be a trigger. But as you mentioned, the before I get more into the trigger, as you mentioned the whole man cave, I think
Mm,
one of the big problems is that when the man comes out of his cave, he has relaxed, he has processed things, he is ready now to come back and to have communion with the wife. But
Hmm.
she has not had her moment. She has not had the chance to de-stress. She has not had the time to breathe. The problem is still there. You still haven't spoken to her about it. So the issue is still unsolved. So you come
Right.
out ready to have a nice life, or ready to get naughty and get down to business. And she's like, hold up, buddy. Hold up, I'm not there yet. You walked away, you left me in the turmoil. I'm still in the turmoil. I'm still boiling up out here. I'm still
Right.
upset.
Right.
So we're at two different points really. But
Hmm.
as you mentioned to the trigger and the hurt, I don't know if you've ever had like a problem with a toe or something, like your toe is sore for some reason,
Okay.
and somebody's walking past and they accidentally step on your toe, and based on your reaction, the person is perturbed because they think, okay, I'm sorry I stepped on your toe, but is it really that bad? Do you really have to behave like that or cry like that? Not realizing that your toe is sore, your toe is broken, but you
Mm.
have it all dressed up in your pretty shoes. Nobody know your toe is broken. And so I think sometimes in relationship, there's different things that we do or say. Almost anything can be a trigger. And the sad part about it is that a lot of us don't even realize that we have the triggers
Right.
until our spouse steps on that toe, and then we react in such a way, and we didn't even realize
Mm.
that we would have responded like that. We didn't realize that we had hurts that were not healed.
Right. Right.
Yeah. Yeah. But I have another analogy to that pops up in my head. It's like
Go
an
ahead.
animal that's hurt,
Hmm.
and you're trying to offer help and healing to the animal, but he or she, the animal, is biting after you and trying to get away from you.
Okay.
But their healing lies with you, and with um their decision to make themselves vulnerable, so that
Mm.
you can, and trust you enough so that you can help to facilitate that healing process. And I think
Mm. Beautiful.
in marriages, I think that's exactly sometimes what happens, or how it should be, that
Right.
sometimes our healing lies within our spouse, but if we
Absolutely.
don't make ourselves vulnerable enough for our spouse to touch where it hurts,
Right.
to bring that healing, if we keep on being overly defensive, then
Hmm.
sometimes we could miss the opportunity to heal.
No, beautiful. Well said. Our spouse can make us better, or it can make us bitter,
Mhm.
and it's the choice will always be up to us. As you're speaking, my mind goes back. That's so important too, to really get to know one another, because if you don't have a little bit of past history with your spouse, and certain things that might have transpired, somebody asked one time, should one tell everything before you get into a relationship or before you get married? And I've always said, like I've said before, also that if it's going to be an issue and a challenge for your relationship, you know what, you might as well face the elephant in the room, and
Mhm.
have that conversation, because one word that could be said in a conversation could trigger that individual because of what has happened in the past, and
Mhm.
because that conversation was never had. Again, like you mentioned, that healing has not taken place like it should be.
Mhm.
So some things, as you mentioned, yeah, that can what bugs an individual when it comes to communication or pet peeves is name calling, man.
Mhm. That one is huge.
I've been in places where I've heard man call your wife a certain name, and I just rolled my eyes back in my, like I could not. And so I'm saying to myself, and you're expecting her to make a meal for you when you go home, and you're
Mhm.
expecting
Plus
her to do.
dessert, plus dessert, plus special dessert.
Matt, you have just, so name calling is something that you just got to be so careful of, because
Mhm.
it could reveal a dark side of you. So why do we have to go to that dark side? You
Mhm.
have just allowed your wife to lose respect for you. And when it
Mhm.
comes to a man, a husband, I mean, respect is huge. And once that respect is lost, it takes time to build that back up again. Just like when trust is lost, it takes a while to build trust back up again. You love that individual, but you know, you become more cautious because how could you dare even call me those names to begin with? I'm your wife. I'm your fiance. I'm the one that you're planning on marrying. So some of the pet peeves that there's also blaming one another, or even self-blaming, or just avoidance of some conversation that should be had that wasn't had, or pretending to be listening but not really. Not really.
Stonewalling is another huge one.
Tell us about it.
So stonewalling is basically like setting up a wall, setting up a barrier between yourself and your spouse.
Okay.
Sometimes people do it to quote unquote keep safe, but
Mm-hmm.
you also ensure that you keep your partner out as well. So that
Mm-hmm.
can be very damaging to the relationship. People who are stonewalled often feel demeaned or abused, right? It's
Right.
part of stonewalling could be given silent treatment, abruptly walking away during a conversation,
Mm-hmm.
you avoid conflict to the point where you basically avoid your spouse,
Right.
you avoid eye contact, you abruptly move to another task when you see them
Mm-hmm.
coming, you minimize their concerns. I think that's
Right.
another big one too, minimizing our partner's concerns, and
Okay.
sometimes being downright offensive. So after
Mm.
you minimize the concern, then you turn around and say, so why you behaving like that?
Mm.
How you so thin skin? Adding adding fuel to fire, right? Being overly defensive, aggressive body language like eye rolling or scowling,
Mm.
refusing to answer questions, deflecting and placing blame, ignoring the person or pretending you don't hear, simply
Mm-hmm.
saying I'm fine and nothing else, or everything is good. Yes, yes, it's good, it's good, it's good. And you
Right.
know it's not good, you know?
Right.
So yeah, so those are some examples of stonewalling, which can be very hurtful and very damaging in the relationship.
And also remember, you mentioned Stonewall, and there's also criticism,
Oh,
continual, continual criticism.
huge.
The food should be a little bit hotter. Why wasn't it this way? Why wasn't this done? I found, I'll be vulnerable here. I found myself when I used to work shift work, and I came home, I used to work like 6 on, 6 off, and
Mhm.
3 days of days and 3 days of nights. And my wife can tell you is that when I came home, I became very critical. I guess because of the long hours I was working and the shift. I mean, if there was a paper on the ground and everything else was clean and everything else, I'd be saying basic. I'm using it for an example, right? How small it was, but you tell me this paper's been on the ground for so long, I know to pick it up,
Mhm.
or something is out of whack or whatever the thing is. So I had to basically check myself to just to realize, you know what, it's a shift I was on. Your body's a bit not aligned like it should be because of the two different shifts you're working. So I basically held my peace, for the first couple of days. I had conversations, but after a while, you just come back to earth. So those out there that's working shift work, I understand what it's like. I know what it's like when you come home, man. If you're not careful, you'll pick up the conversation, instead of being loving and being heartfelt, it can become very critical because of the long hours that one might have been
When you're
working.
overly tired, yes,
Absolutely.
really tired, you can get really cranky. Don't
Really
necessarily have
cranky.
this judgment. But as you mentioned, word, over 60% of our body is made up of water, and
Hmm.
there was a water experiment that was done years ago, and I suppose it's something you can still continue to do. But in the experiment, what they basically did was get water in two identical containers, and over one
Right.
container that
Hmm.
constantly speak positive, loving, kind words, and over the other it would be negative, horrible words. And they put both of them, and I think it was a special freezer, froze it, and the
Right.
pattern that came out of the one with beautiful words was like diamond like beautiful patterns. And the
Mm-hmm.
one the container that had in the water to which negative words were spoken came out looking all messed up, all ugly, all
Wow.
erratic, you know. And so, you know, words have power and words have life in them.
Mm,
And so, as you mentioned words earlier, you know, tonight, Sir Bunny, the words that we speak to our spouse. You just mentioned criticism. Those are negative words that can kill your spirit, that kills your self-esteem.
absolutely.
It can just deflate you, you know, and make you feel
Hmm.
like you don't even want to go on.
Right.
So we have to really be careful. You know, are we speaking life? Are we speaking death in our relationships?
Death and life is in the power
Power.
of the tongue.
Mm,
We mentioned earlier in the scripture that the tongue is full of deadly poison. It's an unruly member. It speaks about the only thing that about that's an unruly member. So how can, if I have this thing that's called an unruly member, how can I be conscious and just be present and just knowing how to tame that unruly member, because it's going to benefit me in the end. So it's coming to an end here, and I just want to go over some I guess some tidbits or some suggestion where we can effectively communicate your feelings in a relationship. One of them is to allow yourself to feel. In other words, going into the conversation with guilt or apprehension about your feelings, it's not going to help your partner. You're completely allowed to feel whatever you're feeling. Don't shut down your feelings. These emotions have been built in you. So you're allowed to feel the way you feel, and nobody can tell you not to feel that way. You know, it's interesting when someone feels a certain way and another person saying, well, you don't feel that way. You don't have to feel that way. No, this is how I'm feeling right now. So accept
mhm,
what I'm feeling right now, although I'm not going to allow this feeling to take over and to control me. So you're allowed to talk about your feelings. So label your feelings. Another one, you're experiencing these feelings, but are you reading more into them that's actually there? Are you over exaggerating? It's important exercise for you to do on your own before opening up and sharing with someone. Also, start with yourself. If you're extroverted or you like talking about your feelings a lot, your first inclination maybe to talk it out with your spouse. It's a great thing to do. If you can't talk to your spouse, I mean, that's where
mhm,
now emotional affair happens, which is something we'll tackle down the road.
mhm,
The reason why that happens is because I can't say what I need to say in this relationship. I
mhm,
can't I can't communicate to you my feeling because you're just not listening. You're not being empathetic, and when you have a relationship, when your feelings or not felt by the other,
disregarded.
and
Mhm,
and you don't have that care and heartfelt attitude, you
mhm,
will go outside your relationship
mhm,
because somebody will find interest in you that you're sharing some things that maybe you couldn't talk about or whatever the case is. So also remember how much you matter. You do
mhm,
matter in spite of how
mhm,
you're feeling. You do matter. Swap those feelings for feelings of confidence in that moment. It's that you got to program yourself. This is how I'm feeling, but I can also generate this feeling of confidence and
mhm,
security, which is going to help in the strength of my relationship. And
mhm,
above all, when you're entering the conversation with your significant other, be happy that you're taking this step. It's a step that's excellent for you and for your partner. So as we come to our end tonight, what would you want to leave our audience with tonight when it comes to the relationship killer, which is communicating ineffectively?
I think if all else fails, sometimes it can help to paint your spouse a word picture. Jesus was very good at that. He used to tell a lot
Mm,
of stories, and every parable is a word picture. When you
right.
say, "Who's my neighbor?" he didn't just answer you. He started to tell you the story about the Good Samaritan, you
Okay.
know? So sometimes it doesn't come alive to your spouse unless you actually paint them a word picture, something that they can relate to. You know, when
Mm-hmm.
Jesus was talking to the farmer, as he said, the farmer went out to 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 sow seeds, etc.
Right.
So he would tailor the conversation according to the audience. If you're talking to your spouse and maybe it's maybe say you're a wife and your husband is a man and you're talking to him and he's not understanding, maybe you could say to him, I feel like your dirty car that with garbage all over in it that needs to be washed and needs to be attended to, you know. I feel like the motor is going, I feel like the engine is going bad and there's sounds all over and you're not listening and you're still
Okay.
expecting me to perform optimally as this vehicle with a broken engine, you know?
Mm.
So sometimes it is that you can talk to the person in a way in which they can understand using something that they can relate to really express to them how you feel. If all else fails, I think sometimes that's kind of the way to go.
Amen. Well, thank you so much, Jody Ann Campbell Kirsch. Her number is 780-278-0572. She's involved with this program they have every second Thursday, Marriage Matters. If you want to tune in there, again, you can give her a call, 780-278-0572. I'm Bonita Grange, your relationship and life coach. It's been a pleasure to have this conversation tonight. My number is 780-905-7134, or you can connect with me at bonitagrange at gmail.com if you want to have a conversation. If you're having some kind of challenge within your relationship, this is what I do. We have conversation with couples, with individuals. My motto in life is reducing the world, divorce one conversation at a time. So thank you, Sister Jody. It's been a pleasure having you online
Thank
tonight.
you for having me.
We bless you. Have a wonderful evening. Come on in, Mr. O'Shane Douglas. Roshane Douglas.
Thank you for listening to Transforming Your Relationships with Elder Bonita Grange. Join us again next Friday at 5:30 for another program. You're tuned to Higher Ground Gospel Radio, reaching out the highest mountain and the lowest valley. Stay tuned, my friends.
HGG Radio.
Yes, brother Jay.
I'm going through some stuff. I needed to pray for me, right?
I'm here.
Join
All righty. How was that?
HGG Radio for our all-night prayer meeting. Yes, all night. It's time to push, pray until something happens. Right here on HGG Radio. You can visit our YouTube channel, HGTM/HGG Radio. And it's going to be live right here on hggradio.ca. Looking forward to seeing you today. We start at 10 p.m. local time right here in Edmonton, 12 midnight in Jamaica, 12 midnight if you're in some parts of the USA. It's going to be great. It's our all-night prayer meeting. Push, pray until something happens right here on HGG Radio. Looking forward to seeing you.
Yes, brother Jay.
I'm going through some stuff. I needed to pray for me, right?
I'm here.
Join